Catherine had been followed by fighting Osiris for quite a while now. They had been giving orders to capture her, but she didn't want to be captured or being followed. She tried to avoid the fighting Osiris by flying in different directions, but they always managed to find her. But this time, they had been given orders to destroy her ship, killing her even meant in a process. And even though that Catherine didn't want to be killed, she tried anything to avoid that. She tried to activate her navigation computer, tried to activate the slipstream generator in order to escape to some random location rather than being captured or being destroyed by her pursuer. But as she did that, the fighting Cyrus had been constant firing on top of her ship, and her ship's shields were holding at for a moment. But the strength of the shields was less than 10%, about 8% in total. And that she knows the ship wouldn't hold any much longer of the shield. As she was just activated the slipstream generator, the shield of the ship failed. And that meant they were now attacking her ship, causing damage. As she went into the slipstream generator field open, she was gone. But the next second, she was all out again. She didn't have planned to travel that for a moment because she discovered that the generator itself had been damaged. Because something after she had just left the slipstream traveling, the alarm was getting off, showing the generator of the slipstream generator was getting overheated. Apparently, that somehow during but just before she entered the slipstream, the fighting Cyrus had damaged her engines, causing the feedback of energy back to the slipstream generator, causing it to overload. And she had less than 1 minute to leave the ship. Even though she tried to turn it off from the computer itself, but it was too late. The override to do so for safety had been damaged, and she had less than 30 seconds to leave. But as she looked into the front of the computer, she saw a planet. It's a fighting habitable world, but she didn't have time to see which world they were because who knows. But she just ran to the escape pod she had on board and just ejected from the escape pod from the ship. And just only about maybe 10 feet away from the ship, the entire ship vaporized of the explosion. There was nothing left. The damage caused some sort of shock wave to the escape pod, causing some small minor damage, but she managed to escape by piloting to pilot the entire escape pod to the planet's surface. But as she had no idea where this planet was which planet it was, but at least it was habitable. But she didn't know if there was going to be a high presence of military from the command. But it was only when she had, because since the escape pod itself didn't have any other capabilities of space flight or even defense capabilities, but she managed to land the escape pod on the surface. She landed in a dense forest, landed more like a crash landing, but as she lost consciousness at the crash. Only a couple of hours later, when she wakes up, she tried to remember what happened. When she came out to remember, the fighting Osiris attacked her ship, and now she was on an unknown planet. She tried to do some work, do some look at the escape pod. If it was possible that she can maybe work it so that she could leave the planet and or maybe fly away from the location. But apparently the crash made that some of the engines were too damaged so that she couldn't repair it. But some of the systems on board were still functional. Even like the radio was among the things. She tried to make sure to figure out where she had ended and upwards. But some place of this planet doesn't even ever make sense to her. Because where she was going, there wasn't no planet in the vicinity. Or not at least a habitable one. So she wonders what caused the ship to just enter to leave the slipstream into an unknown planet, or at least far away from the original destination. But it later turned out that when she did some exploration in the area, she did notice there was a city a lot in a distance, and apparently it was a human city. But then she realized, when she saw the city has at least the quite advanced structures, she believed maybe it was one of those outer rim colonies. And then she realized, if this planet has such strong presence on human, maybe this was in fact one of those high military presence on it. If that happened, she may have been soon be discovered and be taken back to the command. But nothing happened. She waited at the escape pod for hours, but nothing happened. Despite this, though, she had no idea what to do. Since the escape pod itself was useless for her to be going anywhere, and since they didn't have any shields, it wouldn't even protect her from anything. And since the ship's computer had a limit access to those systems, since the computer couldn't even provide any answers for which planet she was on or how she would be able to leave the system without being detected. So the only thing she could do, she took the first aid kit, some of the military rations supplies that she had managed to bring, and self-destruct the entire escape pod. It literally vaporized in front of her eyes without doing some big explosion. But now she didn't have any shelter. But it was the only thing she could do because if someone had found the escape pod, it would have drawn attention not only for her, but she didn't want to bring sought out the attention from anyone. So she started looking around for any place that she could stay, some sort of temporary base or something. And in fact, she found an old abandoned factory just outside that city. So she first of all she did some exploration just to make sure this place was completely abandoned and wasn't even still in use. But it seems to her this place hadn't even been used for maybe for 10 or 20 years. So she took it made it as her temporarily home. Even when she discovered some of the technology that was left behind, she was really impressed, very shocked to see some of the technology, like the computers, was way older than she expected. Despite some of the old other reinterred colonies, they still had access to the most standard advanced computer technology no matter what happened. But this planet seems to be had access to technology that was at least a couple centuries old. In her mind, it was very surprising. But at least she found books. Some of the books were actually written in English, and some of them in other language, which she believes must have been either Japanese or Chinese. But she wasn't even that certain of the language. But the English textbooks gave her some information that she was in fact not on a colony, but in fact on Earth. But in her mind, how could that be? Earth was well a very advanced planet. No one has been using this kind of technology. It is a type of computers for years, for centuries. So she wondered, what if she had made some sort of time travel back in time? Even though she's a scientist, she tried to figure out any possible solutions for that. But needed some more information. So she decided go into the city, but dressed as more casual civilian. She had managed to find some clothes from a nearby home in a where she somehow took some clothes and managed to sneak into the city without drawing attention. And she was walking around. She didn't see any signs of military soldiers or even any spaceships on Earth sometimes. So if this was Earth, how far back in time did she have traveled? But she didn't mind it at first off because for the next couple of days she had gathered so much information as much as she could. She went to some local library, trying to read some of the books that she found, and even some local newspapers, and been watching some local news reporters like that. She even had spoken to some of the locals. And for what she understand, the so-called space world where she came from hasn't even been happening yet. Or at least what she believes. But she knows that she is in Japan. But during her time in Japan, or at least in this particular city, she had heard stories about Sekurei key people. She asked one of the people who lives in town, what is Sekurei? She never heard about it before. She explained that is a traveler and never had been in this part of Japan before, and that she never came across the word meaning Sekurei. And from what they told her, that they are an alien race of humanoids who lives in a town. And from that, she had no idea. So she tried to figure out exactly to find more about this Sekurei. She asked more about the people in town, and even despite having no idea of where where they could where they're from, but even despite this, she wondered herself, what is those Sekurei are meeting and what they are from? But even despite this though, she tried to figure out, or at least try to maybe meet and talk to some of these Sekurei. And suddenly, one day when she walked into someone on the street, and luck for her, it was in fact one of the Sekureis, by the name Kazehana. Kazehana was one of the few oldest of the Sekurei. Even though that Catherine was actually somehow amazed or even admire some of the Sekurei's their abilities, she may wonder, what if she will be able to go back in the future? If she'd not be able to bring back some of Sekurei DNA and combined with some of that in the future by her own people, and maybe bring back some sort of hybrid of a super powerful soldier, or maybe manage to bring back some DNA samples from each single Sekurei, and that they can and maybe somehow make a clone. But then she realized one simple mistake. How would she be able to go back to her own time? She had no access to slipstream technology, which hasn't even been invented for several hundred years, or at least from what she understands. But then she realized, ever since in her time, ever since she had been on Earth a couple of times, she had never come across the word of Sakura, or never heard of any beings like them. So she wonders. She came to the conclusion this was in fact Earth, but not the same Earth as she had been on. Turned out, she had been traveling to end up in some ultimate dimension, or at least an ultimate time, ultimate reality, where, or if some sort of dimension of some kind, where this supposed Sakurai did exist, and that she somehow had only not only been traveled back in time, but also ended up in a different dimension. Exactly how it was possible, she cannot even explain it, since without the ship's computer's data, she would not be unable to make some strong indication for that. But she and Kasana had actually getting grown closer. It turned out that when Kasana did show her wind powers to Catherine, she was so amazed. She admired her powers. But during the time, though, Kasana had learned the truth from Catherine, where she's from, or at least what she believes, anyways. Even though that Catherine also maybe believe that Kasana wouldn't even believe her, may think that she is crazy. When Kasana was shown some of the remaining technology that Catherine still maintained, some of the some of those computer technology which she had, it's confirmed she was in fact from a far future, but not only that, from a different time, from a different universe. Kasana and Catherine had only getting closer for this time. But despite this, even after all this time, Kasana has really had been impressed how much Catherine had been showing so much of her technology, telling her all about her time, but knowing exactly that they for a fact shouldn't have told her anything about the future. But despite that, even though that Catherine are from a different universe, but even that she is from an alternate universe, she still shouldn't have told Kasana about any of the future events that may not even happening in her world. But she then had promised Catherine not to tell anyone, not to follow Zacharias, because they probably wouldn't even believe her, or maybe try to gain access to her technology or something. Who knows? But Catherine and Kasana have actually getting more closer. And after Catherine had believed on in the city for nearly 3 years, she and Kasana have been start dating. Even despite after all this happening, Kasana actually liked her more than anything. But there was a lot of things that even Kasana herself was not even ready to be doing for her. One of those things was in fact she was a heavy drinker. Or at least she drank wine also several times on occasion. Even Catherine herself was not much of that type of drinker. But she managed with some convincing to Kasana to give up that drinking as much to drinking so much. And even after so much work, they managed to change Kasana's drinking to a list for only to a few occasions when they both agreed. But even despite that happened, Kasana and Catherine, their love for each other only remained stronger for each single day. Even despite it happens that Catherine still remained that she still missed her own time. But knowing that she was not unable to go back to her time, even if she were to try to invent a time portal or maybe try to invent another ship based on from her own design, maybe another slipstream generator, it still probably wouldn't even have worked due to the fact that the time technology level she is at. Since the Earth she is on currently would not be such advanced enough to even be able to sustain a stable slipstream generator or even work. Some of the technology that was required wouldn't have been invented for several hundred years in the future. It means in the far future, meaning she wouldn't be able to get there. But she had the time actually started working as a doctor in the city, and she had gained so much reputation to be in such grand, so much such knowledge about thinks about helping people, no matter what happens. She had saved countless lives, and that she gained so much reputation of the people as Catherine the Saver, or at least, as many call her, a guardian angel. Even despite this, Catherine and Kazehana had grown even closer. They were in fact never fighting about their relationship, but after they had been dating for another 2 more years, Catherine and Kazehana actually ended up getting married. They were actually very surprised when Kazehana proposed to Catherine. She didn't even expect that though. But Catherine, she was really happy, at least they did happen. And after they had been married for about 2 more years, they decided they want to have a family. But since they couldn't have a children of their own, so they decided to adopt some local children from a local orphanage, which they managed to do so. They adopted 2 daughters and 1 son together. Even though Kazehana was a little bit surprised to be a mother for once, and that she would do anything to protect her new family, and especially that their daughters and their son was really so excited to have a Sakurai warrior, or at least a Sakurai hero, as a mother. They loved her stories, they even loved her doing her wind power. But despite this, Catherine, though, she was just excited to be married to someone like Kazehana. Kazehana and Catherine had remained such deeply in love with each other. Even if that Catherine had even if Catherine hadn't arrived to this earth, she would ever have found a true love, and especially having such great family with her. And this is how Kazehana and Catherine Halsey found a true love and a big family together. The end.